What's going on, Headliner Nation? Kyle with the Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully, you're all doing well out there today because we're going to be talking about some early round draft strategy in this video. Now, it doesn't matter what type of draft you are in, the best way to have a great draft is to get started off on the right foot. And that's what we're going to talk about. How do you do that here in 2020? Now, I may have thrown you off a little bit if you've been subscribed to the channel because that intro was actually for our draft guide, which just dropped over the weekend. That is right. You now officially can get access to the 2020 Fantasy Headliners draft guide. Head to thefantasyheadliners.com. Only $19.99 is going to get you over 600 pages of pure fantasy football bliss to help you win a championship here in 2020. And I don't have to talk it up anymore because you saw that intro and you can tell it's hella fire. So ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and jump into it and start talking about our strategy for the early rounds here in 2020. All right, Headliner Nation. So before we start talking about some players in the early rounds, I want to talk about some strategy that we should have heading in to 2020. Now, the first thing I want to talk about, as always, when you're getting ready to draft, you're doing some research, and the big thing I want you paying attention to in the early rounds this year is risk versus reward. What type of risk are you getting yourself into for a higher reward on a player? Yeah, you could draft a guy with really high upside, but maybe there's a little bit more risk to him. You could draft a guy that the reward might not be as much. Maybe the ceiling's a little bit lower, but that floor is nice and steady. There's not really a whole lot of risk with that player. Pay attention to those guys early on in your draft, because the one thing I can tell you is you do not win your league in the early rounds, but you can lose it. You win fantasy football leagues by making in-season trades and by scouring the waiver wire, okay? You also win it by who you draft in the later rounds. If you do your research and you find those breakout candidates, those sleepers, those guys that are going to provide the most bang for your buck, that is the best way to win your league. Now, one of the issues I see fantasy owners falling into every single season is overdrafting for upside. And let me go ahead and specifically talk about one player this year that could happen with. Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson has a higher ceiling than almost any fantasy football player this year, right? Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, a couple of the ones that he's going to compete with, and you could also say maybe Patrick Mahomes. But Lamar Jackson has the most upside because what he did on the floor or on the ground last year and what he did through the air. He gives you so much fantasy points from everything that he can do. And because of that, people are going to be wanting to reach for him over and over and over. They see the upside. They see what he could do on any given week. And players, fantasy owners, are going to want to be the first one to grab him in 2020. Now, we'll talk about him a little bit more in a few minutes. But quarterback early is not the way to go this year. Quarterback early is something that a lot of people are getting themselves mixed into right now because of before mentioned Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes. People want to get their hands on them. But the value at quarterback is a lot better later on in the draft. So this year, what we're looking at is running back heavy, because there are a lot of good running backs for you to take this year. There's a lot of guys that have good upside, but there are not as many guys this year that you're going to be able to get, put in your lineup, set it every week, and you know this guy is going to be a legit bell cow for you every single week. We've gotten to a time in the National Football League where teams are going to continue to use a running back by committee approach. We're going to see guys giving plays off. We see guys who are specific pass catching backs. We see guys who are short yardage backs, goal line backs, and then the guy that carries a majority of the workload. So spending your early picks on running backs that you know you can start every single week and not have to deal with them getting points taken away because the team wants to use their backup more than normal is a key to victory here in 2020. And also here in 2020, one other thing, leave the first 3 rounds with one of the following: 2 running backs and 1 wide receiver, or 1 running back and 2 wide receivers. Again, to me, it's all about getting that running back early, okay? But how do you want to do it? If you pick at the end of the first round this year, that's going to be a little bit more tough because a lot of your running backs are going to go super early in the first round, and you get to the last of the or the end of the first, and you've got like Tyreek Hill, you've got Michael Thomas sitting there staring you at the face, and it's hard not to draft those guys because we know what we're going to get from them. So if you do that, then you're really going to want to go running back in round 2, and then you could deviate in round 3 and grab yourself another wide receiver. So that's why I'm leaving it open to you. You need to get at least 1 running back in the first 3 rounds this year. I prefer 2, but if the draft value is there for a wide receiver, I don't want you to just pass it up. Now let's talk about some specific players, okay? Some guys who are safe and some guys who are more of a risk. Well, the first round this year, honestly, this is based on current ADP. So at the time this video has come out, whether you're watching it right now as it drops or you're watching it a couple of months from now because you've come across for it, check the date, okay? Because a lot of things could have happened and ADP could have changed. So as of right now, here, June 27th, the day that I'm recording this video, these are the guys in the first round that are the safest. And it's basically the entire first round for me. Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, we know what we're getting out of those guys. Huge ceilings, great high floors. They're basically the 1.01, 1.02. Ezekiel Elliott, okay, we know he's going to get tons of work on the ground. Even if he loses a little bit of that work in the passing game this year because now they have 3 outstanding wide receivers, it's okay. I'm not worried about it because he's going to get tons of volume on the ground. Michael Thomas, best wide receiver in football, arguably. Alvin Kamara, even though I've been vocal this offseason about being careful of Kamara because of his ceiling, he's still a safe pick for anybody out there because he's going to be used in that New Orleans gameplay consistently, okay? It's going to happen. We know that, right? So he's safe. Derrick Henry, he's going to get tons of workload on the ground. Again, if you're looking for that running back that you know is going to get work week in and week out, Derrick Henry. Devontae Adams is the wide receiver 1 on his team. He doesn't have a whole lot of weapons around him in the passing game. He's going to get peppered. Joe Mixon and Nick Chubb. You might not think either of these guys are safe, but trust me, Nick Chubb is in the middle of an offense now that is going to rely on the run game. Kevin Stefanski, okay, worked Dalvin Cook continuously last year. The same thing is going to happen with Nick Chubb this year. Yeah, Kareem Hunt is there, but Kareem Hunt is going to get his own workload as well. These two are not going to take away from each other. Joe Mixon. I've got a must-have video coming up on Joe Mixon. You don't want to miss it. If you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe now because it might be the best piece of work I have ever done. It's already done for the most part. A couple more things to do to it, all right? Got to record it. But I'm waiting to drop it till we get a little bit further into July. But it's coming really, really soon, people. Okay? Tyreek Hill, Julio Jones, a couple of the best wide receivers that you can possibly get. Those are all safe picks for me in the first round. The one risk that I have in the first round is Dalvin Cook. And it's not because I don't love Dalvin Cook, because if you watched this channel last year, you heard Jake and I over and over and over and over tell you to draft Dalvin Cook. Don't be worried about the injuries. Go get him. Well, they do have a changing of the guard this year with that offensive game plan a little bit. Okay. And once again, last season, he did break down towards the end of the year. So we could end up seeing a little bit more Alexander Mattison this year. Okay, the injury risk still is sitting there in my head a little bit with Dalvin Cook. Maybe we see some more Alexander Mattison. Maybe the defense isn't as good this year and they need to throw it a little bit more. I like Dalvin Cook a lot, okay, but he's a risky pick for me in the first round right now. I've got him in the first round. That's where I would say that he's going to be drafted. I'm just saying that if you're looking at the risk versus reward, I would go with Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, and Derrick Henry over Dalvin Cook if I want to play it safe. If you're like, screw this, I'm going all in, I love to toss the dice, I love to gamble a little bit, then Dalvin Cook is your guy, okay? But again, it depends a little bit on what you are wanting to do with your team the rest of the way. Now, moving on into the second round now. What are we going to do in the second round? Well, our safe players and our risk players are a little bit more evenly balanced now. Our safe players for us, Travis Kelce and George Kittle, okay? I don't want to spend a second round pick on them, but if you do, you know what you are getting from both of those guys. So I've got no issues with those tight ends going in the second round if you absolutely feel that that is best for your team. Kenyon Drake doesn't really have anybody there in Arizona that is going to be taking significant workload away from him. Okay, even though I'm a little bit lower on the Arizona offense, just because I'm a little bit concerned about the offensive line and just them picking everything up and moving forward with it. That is why. Okay, but he's still a safe pick because he's going to get lots of volume. Patrick Mahomes, even though I am not taking a quarterback early this year, we know what we're getting every single week from Patrick Mahomes. He's going to throw, and throw. He's got some of the best offensive weapons in the game. He's got one of the best head coaches in the game. He plays in one of the best offenses in the game. It doesn't matter. We know what we're getting. Josh Jacobs is a safe pick for me because, once again, on the ground, the dude is not having any carries taken away from him. Maybe in the passing game he gets some work taken away from him, but this is going to be a team that, once again, completely puts the game plan around running the football, and they've got more than enough weapons on the outside now. Over on Patreon, I did a video breaking down Josh Jacobs and that Las Vegas offense. If you haven't checked it out and you've subscribed to Patreon since then, make sure you go back and find it, okay? Because it goes really in detail and it breaks down game film for you. Austin Eckler is a guy that I'm smashing the draft button on this year over and over and over, and you're going to hear more why in some coming videos. And with Chris Godwin, I still fully believe that he is going to be Tom Brady's number one target in that offense, okay? If they can get him in the slot as much as they did last year, that's awesome. But if not, I still think he's going to be just fine on the outside. I like Chris Godwin this year. Risky players. Now, this is where Lamar Jackson comes into play. To me, Lamar Jackson is risky and Patrick Mahomes isn't, because Patrick Mahomes' value is totally based throwing around the football and an offense that we've seen for a few years now. Okay, we know what we're getting with that offense. We know what we're getting with Patrick Mahomes. With Lamar Jackson, there is a chance that this team says, I don't want to run him as much as we did last year. Baltimore has 4 good running backs, 2 really good running backs, and 2 complementary pieces on that team to run the football. So even though Lamar Jackson is still going to be running around on the ground this year, maybe they cut 5 carries a game away and they give him more to those running backs. What if he doesn't take a step forward as a passer this year? What if Marquise Goodwin doesn't end up being healthy? Now, I love Marquise Goodwin this year. I've done a video on him already, okay? So I'm not talking ill of Marquise Goodwin. I'm just saying in terms of risk, that's why he's on that side. Aaron Jones is a risk for me as well, and you know why, because we've talked about him on a ton of videos so far. Jake did a do not draft video that gave you exactly the reasons why we're skipping on Aaron Jones. DeAndre Hopkins. I like DeAndre Hopkins, but he has more weapons around him this year than he's ever had in years past. And he's going into an offense with a team that he has not had any chance to work out with yet this year. Training camp should start on time, but if it doesn't, the closer we get to the season and the less time he gets to spend with the team, the more likely it is that we could see some roller coaster performances from him. Miles Sanders. I love Miles Sanders. I almost put him over on the safe side, but the reason he's a risk for me right now is because we don't know if they're still going to try and sign a veteran back. Okay, Doug Peterson came out just a few days ago and said he's earned the right to be our starting guy. I absolutely get that. But what if a Boston Scott ends up getting hurt and they need to sign a backup and it's Devonta Freeman and they say, let's give him a little bit more work. Whatever it may be, right now in this time, Miles Sanders is a little bit risky for me still. When we get closer to the season, though, he gets safer and safer and safer and will probably end up being over there. So really, for me, Miles Sanders is kind of right in the middle of these 2 categories. And then Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a risk for me because Damian Williams isn't going anywhere, people. Okay, Clyde Edwards-Helaire's got the highest ceiling of the 2, but Damian Williams is still going to get touches. Andy Reid is not just going to move on from Damian Williams, okay? He's been too good in the limited role that we've seen him so far. What about the 3rd round? What are we doing over in the 3rd round? Well, maybe this will shock you, but Todd Gurley for me is a safe pick this year because the dude's going to get a ton of volumes. Yeah, the knee might be a little bit of a concern, okay? But I still think he's going to be fine because even if his knee starts to bother him a little bit, this dude wants to play this year. He got a 1-year deal. If he can prove that he is healthy, someone's going to sign him next offseason. But one of the reasons that he only got a 1-year deal this year and was released by LA is because there's concerns about his knee. If the guy goes out and plays this year, doesn't miss any games, and is used like the running back that he used to be, Todd Gurley ends up being a huge advantage for you in the 3rd round this year. That's why I think even if he has some pain this year, he plays through it. Leonard Fournette, nobody's taking any carries away from Leonard Fournette. Yeah, maybe he loses some targets like he did last season, but in the 3rd round, you're getting a guy that could be a mid to high running back too with no problem whatsoever. Kenny Golladay is one of my favorite draft picks this year, and I've got a must-have video coming with more information on him, as well as Amari Cooper, and as well as Odell Beckham Jr. I like all 3 of these guys this year. Kenny Golladay, you might argue that he's a little bit of a risk because of Matthew Stafford, but if Matthew Stafford was really in a bad spot and was not going to be able to come back this year, they would have drafted a quarterback, and they didn't at all in any round. Amari Cooper does have some upside and downside, okay? It can be a little bit of a roller coaster on any given week, but I've got a video coming to tell you why that won't be the case this year. Odell Beckham Jr., okay, you can hate on the guy as much as you want to, but he still put together 1,000 yards last season. Still had a good season. He's going to be the number 1 target in that offense, regardless of what Jarvis Landry does, okay? He's Odell Beckham Jr. He's OBJ. He's the same dynamic playmaker that we've always seen before. And Mark Andrews, he's the number 1 target there in Baltimore. Okay, so he's a safe pick for me here as well. The risky pick, Mike Evans. Okay, we're going to see more work going towards the tight ends there. They're going to be running more 2 tight end sets. I still think Mike Evans is going to get you around 1,000 yards, and I'm hoping he still gets you anywhere between 6 and 9 touchdowns. Okay, but again, it is a little bit more of a riskier pick because we don't know what we're going to see with the game plan, and can Brady still go down the field? Okay, I personally am not concerned too much about this offense, so I'm not letting it worry me too much. However, for you out there drafting in the 3rd round, if you can get a guy like Kenny Golladay, Amari Cooper, Odell Beckham Jr., I'll take him over Mike Evans. I'll also take him over DJ Moore. I don't have anything against DJ Moore, but again, he's got a new quarterback that's not known for pushing the ball down the field. They've got Robbie Anderson now. Ian Thomas could step up this year and be a playmaker that we've seen the tight end position with Greg Olsen be in the past. And then with Christian McCaffrey, we know what we're getting with him. Okay, he's still going to get a ton of looks out of the background. Okay, Melvin Gordon is a risk for me as well. He's on a new team. He goes from playing in LA at sea level to playing a mile high up in Denver. Maybe the altitude messes with him a little bit. Adam Thielen, I've talked about him as well on an overdrafted players video. I'm worried about Adam Thielen because can he really be the wide receiver 1 this year? When we've seen no Stephon Diggs on the field in the past, it has limited Adam Thielen, not in volume, but in playmaking. His playmaking goes down, even though he gets more volume with no Stephon Diggs. Chris Carson obviously is a risk because of the hip injury, even though I do like him and I would take a shot on him if he's sitting there, especially if he were to drop to the 4th round. And then Le'Veon Bell, also a risk. Why is he a risk? Because Adam Gase sucks. Okay, he's not a good head coach at all. Sorry to be so blunt there, ladies and gentlemen, but that's just the way it is. So there you have it, a little bit of early round draft strategy for you, some things to take a look at, some ideas to get in your head before you start drafting, and what I think about some of those players here in the first 3 rounds this year. Headliner Nation, do me a favor, hit that like button down below, and then comment below with any questions that you have on the video, players that you're skipping on or trying to draft this year, guys you think are safe, guys you think are risky. Let me know in the comments. And then as always, if you are new to the Fantasy Headliners, if this is your first video with us, then hit that subscribe button and become a part of Headliner Nation today. Hopefully you all have went out and gotten your draft guides because, ladies and gentlemen, it is amazing. So if you haven't done it yet, go do that right now so you can start digging into it and getting ready for this season. Headliner Nation, stay safe, stay healthy. Hope you all are having a great day out there, and I'll catch you on the next video of the Fantasy Headliners.